Welcome back to Yoga Insider Podcast. I'm your host, Alex Waycott. On today's episode, I want to share a few tips with you to help you make the most of your next yoga photo shoot. Part of being a modern yoga teacher is marketing ourselves online, and professional photography is one of those investments that we can make in our yoga businesses that can really help us stand out amongst a crowd, look polished, and share our message with the world. And I think that if you are an independent yoga teacher, this is something that is going to be especially important for you. And you really do need that professional photography and maybe even professional videography to get your message out there. So I am not a photographer by any means. So I am sharing my tips today on today's episode from the yoga teacher perspective, but I have been the subject of so many yoga photo shoots over the years. And I have to say that I've definitely learned a few things through trial and error that could definitely help your photo shoot go a little bit more smoothly. Because at the end of the day, this is something that we invest in, and you want to make sure that you're getting what you need from those shoots that, you're spending money on and that you're spending time on as well. And I want to share a little story with you. So I remember when I was taking my 200-hour yoga teacher training, I decided while I was in the training that I was going to invest in a yoga photo shoot for myself. And back then, I wasn't really on social media. I think I might have just made a Facebook account for myself. But I don't even know. I think Instagram did exist, but I did not have Instagram. I was not posting things on social media back then, which is probably a good thing. Thinking back on it, no evidence of me on the internet. But I knew that I was going to need a photo shoot done because people were still, putting photos on yoga studio websites for teacher bios. And at that point in time, yoga teachers, especially in smaller communities where I was teaching, we were relying a lot still on paper posters that, we would create and then print out and go hang up in Starbucks, paper posters, advertising our classes and series and stuff like that. And so I knew I needed a photo shoot, and that would be a good step for me. And so I booked myself this photo shoot, and it was kind of like a gift to myself for, graduating 200-hour yoga teacher training. And at the time, it felt like a really big investment. And the photographer that I chose was somebody who typically shot weddings and engagements and prom photos and things like that. I'm not actually sure if she'd ever done a yoga photo shoot before, but her photos were beautiful. And I remember she picked me up in her car and drove me around, and we went to a couple of different locations. We went to this big field, and we went to this old house, and I don't know, it was really cool, and we got tons of shots. And then, I don't know, a little while later, maybe a month later, it was time for me to receive my photos, and I had to go to her house and physically pick up the prints of the photos. She had printed out my whole gallery. So there was a stack of 100 photos for me. And then the rest of the photos were on a CD. And it's kind of a sweet memory. I still think back to that original yoga photo shoot that I did. And, things have changed a lot since then. We have a lot more photographers to choose from. And we also carry technology in our pockets that can actually capture really wonderful images on demand. So, even if spending money on a professional photo shoot maybe just isn't in your budget right now, like you could still do your own photos with a friend, with your phone, and apply some of the tips that I want to share today. So I'm going to share my first big tip with you, and that is to get really clear on what your photos are going to be for before you even book the photo shoot. Like before you even choose your photographer, take some time to reflect on what you are going to use these photos for. So, are they more general photos that are maybe, going to be used to define your personal brand or just like your presence, your message, maybe some portraits of your face? Or are they photos that are for something very specific, like a workshop or a training? Because depending on what the photos are for, you are going to need to plan a little bit differently. So if I'm planning a shoot for a yoga teacher training, for example, most likely in my planning, I'm going to be thinking about, materials that are relevant to my training that I'm going to bring with me to the shoot. So things like training manuals, yoga props, reading material, like books from my reading list, all of those things are going to be like super relevant to advertising and marketing my yoga teacher training. Same thing goes, say you are going to be running like an inversion workshop. When you are planning what your photo shoot is going to look like, in that planning process, you're obviously going to make sure that like you're going to get photos of you or someone else, doing inversions. And sometimes in the planning process, it might even mean thinking about like inviting another person to your photo shoot. I've done this before where I've brought someone else in to be like my student because I needed to model some hands-on assists as part of a training. And so I would definitely spend some time thinking about that. Like, what are your photos for? Because what you want to be mindful of is that you're not mismatching your marketing. And so, like, say you're looking to promote an intro to yoga series or like beginner yoga series, then you probably don't want photos of yourself doing really complex hand balances, for example, just because that's probably not going to attract the students that you are hoping to attract for what you're offering. And I would say that this is like not necessarily a mistake, but maybe something where, I could have spent some more time planning, especially in like my earlier days of getting yoga photo shoots. I would go into it maybe with an idea of like what I wanted to wear. And then, when I look back at the photos, like they're just not relevant to what I was trying to offer or like the message that I was trying to share. So you want to make sure that like everything's going to be on the same page first and foremost. And then once you've decided what your photo shoot is for, then I would go ahead and take the initiative to create your own mood board. And you could also do this like even before you seek out a photographer, because creating a mood board might help you, figure out like the kind of look that you're going for. So you want to take some time like to gather inspiration. And I really like Pinterest for this. I've never like been much of a Pinterest girl. Like I do not sit around on Pinterest looking at things, but I use it specifically for photo shoots. And so, Pinterest really is wonderful for allowing you to go through and explore like even colors and like textures that you want to incorporate into a shoot. Obviously, like yoga postures, shapes, lighting, like you can use a mood board to start to create a bit of a vibe and a bit of an intention for your shoot. And then the best part of that is based on, what you put together yourself, then you can seek out a photographer who maybe has a similar style. So are you looking for somebody who shoots in a style that's like more light and airy? Are you looking for something dark and moody, more natural, more polished? Like, what's the look that you need? What message are you trying to convey? And then once you decide, who you want to work with, you can share that mood board with your photographer. And that way they can also kind of see your vision, and you'll be able to, begin that process of collaboration. And, I love working with photographers because I feel like, first of all, like I've been able to work with so many incredible, talented photographers over the years. So thank you to all of my photographers if you're listening to this. But what I love about working with photographers is that I often find that like there's just so many parallels between our lines of work, because often they're also, freelancers, creatives, entrepreneurs. And I find that as an independent yoga teacher, I have a lot in common when I'm working with those people. And so some photographers will even create their own mood boards. And I've had, some photographers who, also come into the shoot with their own vision as well. And that's super cool. So if you have a photographer that's open to that, you could even create like a collaborative mood board on Pinterest. It lets you do that. Instagram is also a good place to look for inspiration in terms of like posing, locations, postures, things like that. And for one of my recent shoots, I drew some inspiration from an Ashtanga teacher, Kino McGregor, and she often does her photo shoots in more like urban settings. And I really like the contrast. So she'll be in the middle of like a big, busy city, and she'll just be like sitting in meditation or, doing a posture. And I don't know, it's really like striking. It's really cool. And so in a shoot that I did last spring, my friend Colton and I, who's my favorite photographer, we kind of played with that inspiration and like put our own spin on it. So once you've gathered your inspiration, you know the intention behind your photos, you know who you want to work with, and you're getting a little bit closer to the shoot, I would choose your clothing intentionally. And this is like one of those places where I feel like I've totally missed the mark in past photo shoots. I can think of this one shoot specifically where I don't know why I thought this was a good idea, but I was like, I'm just going to wear this like short red dress and I'm going to do yoga in a red dress in a park, and it's, it's going to look really cool. And this is like no fault of the photographer whatsoever. She's amazing. This was just like my complete lack of foresight. When I look back at those photos, I'm like, what does this have to do with, me advertising like my online yoga classes at the time or my pre-registered yoga classes at the time? Like I would never like teach yoga in a red dress. And like, it's not even something that I would normally wear, even in terms of like showcasing my personal style. Like it was just totally random. So don't make that mistake. Like wear something that makes sense for the message and like the image that you want to portray. And it does not mean that you can't wear a dress in your photo shoot, because there's like totally a time and place for that. But I have just personally missed the mark a few times in terms of what I wore. And, maybe that's the price that you pay for like taking risks and being experimental. But yeah, what you wear really matters. So first of all, if the focus of your shoot is like really heavily on yoga asana and like capturing the like geometry of the poses and the alignment of the poses, I would definitely choose something more form-fitting so that you can showcase that, versus a shoot where maybe you're wanting to capture more movement and more fluidity and maybe it's kind of blurry, like that could be a cool time to play with more flowing fabrics in your outfit. And I would also consider like the location and where you're going to be shooting. So if you know that you are going to be taking photos in like a park that has tons of greenery and trees, you probably don't want to wear a green outfit because it's going to blend in. And I know that this sounds obvious, but it's just one of those little things, where like you don't want to ruin a whole photo shoot just by wearing the wrong thing, right? So make sure that you're choosing colors that are going to stand out in the background and the location that you're shooting in. And then an outfit that makes sense for what you're trying to capture. So yeah, definitely think about the vibe. Like fitted is going to showcase those sharper shapes. Flowy is going to help you capture movement. If you work with any specific brands, if you're sponsored by brands, like maybe that's an opportunity for you to showcase some of those items in the photo shoot. Like it's totally up to you, but definitely plan ahead what you're going to wear. And don't let that be an afterthought that you just decide at the last minute. And then also think about like what you're wearing in relationship to like the yoga mat that you're using. So these days, I don't even like to incorporate a yoga mat in my photo shoots at all. But if you're using one of the things that can happen is like, say your yoga mat is black and your pants are black, they are probably going to blend into each other and it might not look great in photos. So when you're trying to create that contrast in terms of color, think about like the color of your mat, the color of your pants, the color of the background, and make sure that everything is going to work together. So another big one is come prepared with a plan in terms of what specific shots you want to get, especially if you are trying to capture yoga poses. Because I can't count the amount of times that I've shown up to a photo shoot and typically you have an allotted amount of time, right? Like maybe it's only 30 minutes or 60 minutes. And I've just wasted time standing in a field trying to figure out like, okay, what pose should I do next? And you think that you'll be able to just come up with it on the spot and like go from, posture to posture. And some days everything flows and you'll be able to do that. But I highly suggest coming with a list of poses that you really want to capture. And like, just put that list like in the notes in your phone or like screenshot like example images of the poses that you want to get and have that on hand so that you don't, freeze up in the middle of your shoot and forget. And so that you can really take advantage of that limited amount of time that you probably have available with your photographer. Now, the other thing that I have definitely found out through trial and error is that some yoga asanas photograph really beautifully and just look amazing on camera, look really aesthetically pleasing. And there are some other poses that look super awkward in photos specifically. Like there's just no clean lines, they look weird, they look uncomfortable. And if you're unsure, don't be afraid to like test it out ahead of time and like just, put your phone on self-timer or take a video or whatever and then like screenshot it. But figure that out before you go into the shoot and, don't waste your time doing super complicated poses that like aren't even going to look good in your photos. Now, the other thing that you don't want to forget is lifestyle shots. So again, it depends on your shoot, but if you're trying to showcase more of like who you are, more of your personal brand and, your interests and kind of like the bigger like messaging around you, don't be afraid to show that. So maybe, you're really into journaling and like you showcase that in your photos. Maybe you play an instrument. Maybe you do sound healing. Like bring those other aspects of yourself into your photo shoot. And again, plan ahead for it, because those are the things also that like are really going to make you stand out. And those are the parts of you that other people and potential students might be interested in knowing about you. Now, when you are actually at your shoot with your photographer, you want to make sure that you are communicating during the shoot. And it's really going to depend, for this one, on who the photographer is, because some photographers are going to come in with previous experience shooting yoga poses. Maybe they're even a yoga teacher themselves, and like they will totally be able to help direct you in your poses. But if that's not the case and you're working with a photographer who's like not familiar with yoga, they've never practiced yoga before, maybe you're the first yoga teacher that they've ever worked with, I would really like let them know when you want your photo taken. So especially if you're doing poses, like get yourself into the expression of the pose that you want photographed and tell them, okay, I'm in it, like take my picture now. Because what I've found is sometimes you'll end up with a gallery of photos where you're kind of like halfway in a pose or halfway out of a pose. And like maybe that's just not what you're looking for. And maybe it is, but yeah, I would just, speak up and let the photographer know what you need, because ultimately, like they probably are also looking to, deliver the end product that you're looking for. So don't be afraid to direct them. And the other thing that you could do is maybe even like bring a yoga teacher friend with you. Maybe you and a friend like book in with a photographer back to back. And then you can kind of take turns like giving each other some little cues, like, straighten your arms, lift your chin, and you can like help each other out during the shoot. Now, the last tip that I'll leave you with for today's episode is how often do you need to refresh your photos? So it really depends on like how much you teach, how much you need to market, how many things you have on the go. And in the past, like once a year was enough for me, twice a year was enough for me. And these days, I try to do a different photo shoot every quarter. And I know that that can sound like a lot. So every quarter, like 4 times a year. But because nobody else is doing the marketing for me, I really have to treat myself almost like a yoga studio would treat themselves. And I'm always trying to make sure that I have content that goes with and matches like the offerings that I'm putting out into the world, because photos definitely go out of date quickly. And I don't personally want to, use photos that I took like 7 years ago to market the things that I'm putting out into the world today. I want to make sure that my images are fresh, that they look like me, that, people can recognize me and know who I am from my photos. And so that's something that I think is super important, is like, don't rely on just doing one photo shoot and then using those photos for the next like 5 years or 10 years, because they can definitely look dated. And you do want to, keep your photos looking fresh and looking relevant. So ideally, I would try to invest in photos once a year for sure, just to keep it current and make sure that your students are, remembering you and recognizing you by your photos. So these are some of my quick tips for you based on my experience doing so many yoga photo shoots. And I'll quickly recap those takeaways. So the first is be really clear on the purpose of your photos. Create a mood board for inspiration so that, again, you can really kind of clarify that vision. Choose your clothing and the setting of your photo shoot intentionally. Plan your poses ahead of time and test them out. Try to balance the poses, the asana shots with lifestyle content. Communicate during the shoot and try your best to refresh your photos regularly. And on that last note with refreshing your photos regularly, if you don't have access to a professional photographer all the time, maybe that means that you do like one professional shoot a year, and then you take, the same amount of care and planning and put that into doing your own photos, like with your phone and doing them with a friend or something like that, because you can still get some great, useful content yourself with your phone as well. But I really think that, photography is one of the ways that we can communicate our work and our message. And I know that it can definitely feel a little bit weird. It's like one of the parts of marketing and putting ourselves out there as yoga teachers that can be so uncomfortable. And I remember when I went full-time as a yoga teacher and I had to start marketing myself, like I felt so awkward about it. I hated it. It was not something that I looked forward to. But over time, it's actually something that I've grown to enjoy. It's, another opportunity to be creative. And if you are feeling like you hate it, maybe you just kind of need to refresh your mindset on it a little bit, and really understand that like this is one of the ways that potential students are going to see you, that they're going to connect with you, and it's going to give them a sense of like what to expect when they step into your class or into your next training or your next workshop or retreat. So if this episode was helpful for you, definitely share it with another yoga teacher friend. And please make sure that you rate and review the podcast wherever you are listening so that more yoga teachers around the world can listen to Yoga Insider. Thank you so much for being here. I'll see you next time.